Hey everyone, if you love a good story that makes you think, make sure to like this video. Subscribe to our channel and leave your comments below. Your support helps us keep creating incredible content. The day of the unexpected gift. The air in the civil registry office smelled of old paper and fresh ink. A bureaucratic scent that had nothing to do with the love story they had just sealed. Sitting opposite each other, separated by a cold table and a pile of documents that ended what was once a forever, were Isabel and Marcus. She held the pen so tightly her knuckles were white. It wasn't indecision, but a desperate attempt to stop her fingers from trembling. Her name was already there, printed in black ink, waiting only for the final signature. Marcus's. He, for his part, maintained his usual impassive expression, his features rigid, his dark eyes hiding any trace of emotion. He took the pen with the precision of someone accustomed to definitive decisions. The stroke on the paper was quick, firm, without hesitation. There were no tears, no protests, no last attempt to fix things. Just a discreet gesture of farewell. Isabel felt a weight in her chest, not of regret, but of exhaustion. It wasn't just the divorce. It was the months of weariness, the sleepless nights, the effort to keep her dignity intact while everything around her crumbled. And now, there was nothing left to cling to. She picked up the documents with rigid fingers and stood up. The movement was small, insignificant, but something inside her broke. The room began to spin. First, a sharp ringing in her ears. Then, darkness. The impact wasn't strong, but the sound of her body hitting the floor made Marcus's world crumble. He was by her side before anyone else could react. His voice, always so controlled, cracked in absolute panic. "Isabel! Isabel! Talk to me!" She didn't respond. Her face was pale, her lips parted as if she were trying to breathe. Time stretched as the registry employees ran, their voices blending into a distant echo. But Marcus only saw Isabel. He only heard the sound of his own heart beating erratically in his chest. "Call an ambulance!" His voice was a roar. The next few minutes were a blur of sirens and red lights reflecting in the building's windows. Marcus didn't let go of her hand for a second. Even unconscious, Isabel's skin was warm. Is she alive? He didn't know why that mattered so much. He didn't know why, after signing those papers, feeling her weak pulse under his fingers caused him a desperation he hadn't felt in a long time. But then, at the hospital, everything changed. The smell of antiseptic and the monotonous sound of monitors arrived before her eyes opened. Isabel blinked against the white light of the room and felt the world spin slightly. The white ceiling, the pale walls, all so sterile, so empty. And then, she saw him. Marcus was there. The impeccable suit from a few hours ago was now wrinkled, his tie loosened. But what really struck her were his eyes. He looked at her as if he had seen a ghost, as if he were lost. Before Isabel could say anything, the door opened, and a doctor entered. The man held a folder, his expression excessively professional for what he was about to say. "Mrs. Miller, we have the results of your tests." She forced herself to pay attention. "Your faint was caused by a drop in blood pressure, something common considering your condition." Isabel frowned. "My condition?" The doctor paused as if expecting her to already know, but she didn't. "Congratulations, you're pregnant, 3 months." The silence that followed was absolute. Isabel blinked. Her mind raced in 1,000 directions, trying to process the words, looking for some flaw in the logic, some explanation that wasn't that. Pregnant? She was pregnant. And when her gaze finally met Marcus's, she knew nothing would ever be the same. He wasn't breathing. His eyes, which always hid everything, were now open in a way she had never seen before. For the first time in his life, Marcus was completely lost. The end of them had become the beginning of something much bigger. Isabel felt the air weigh heavily around her. The doctor's words still floated in the silence of the room, as if time had refused to move forward from the moment they were uttered. Pregnant. She didn't know why that hit her so hard. It wasn't as if she had never considered the possibility. She had ignored symptoms. The fatigue she attributed to divorce stress. The nausea she treated as anxiety. Everything made sense now, but knowing was different from feeling. And in that instant, she felt the impact like an electric shock passing through every fiber of her body. Marcus was still there, standing, not moving a muscle. His eyes fixed on her, as if waiting for a reaction, a confirmation, anything that would help him process the new reality. But Isabel had no answers. She looked away, fixing her gaze on a spot on the white sheet. She needed something solid, something that wouldn't move beneath her feet. "This changes nothing." The words came out before she could contain them. Cold, firm, a barrier she tried to raise between herself and the confusion expanding inside her. But Marcus noticed. He always noticed. The slight tremor in her voice, the way her hands, resting on the sheet, were slightly clenched. He took a step forward. Isabel felt his energy invade the space between them. The woody perfume, familiar, a scent she knew better than she would like. It was always there, on his skin, on their sheets, in the moments when they were still a couple. And she had allowed herself to believe it could be forever. But now, she had to maintain control. "This is our child, Isabel." His voice lacked its usual firmness. It wasn't an argument. It wasn't an order. It was a fact, one that carried the weight of everything they had lost, and of what, somehow, still existed between them. Isabel looked up. The clash between them was palpable. Marcus didn't seem like the same man who signed those papers at the civil registry a few hours earlier. That man was cold, distant, as if nothing could touch him. But this one, standing in front of her, had a face marked by the impact of the news. Dark eyes, loaded with something she didn't want to decipher. Because if she looked too long, she might find traces of the love she was trying to bury. She breathed slowly, savoring the metallic taste of uncertainty on her tongue. "I don't need you for this, Marcus." She saw him blink, as if the phrase had been an unexpected blow. "Don't be ridiculous." The answer came sharp, cutting, but the anger wasn't in his voice. It was somewhere else, deeper, more dangerous. She refused to back down. "Ridiculous? For not wanting you to interfere in my life, in your life?" She let out a short, incredulous laugh. "This isn't just about you, Isabel." She clenched her teeth. "No, because it seems that until a few minutes ago, none of this existed for you. You signed those papers, Marcus. I'm no longer your wife." He leaned slightly forward, shortening the distance between them. "But I'm still the father of this child." Isabel felt her heart race, but kept her face impassive. She wouldn't give him that satisfaction. Marcus ran a hand through his hair, an impatient gesture she knew well. He was fighting something within himself. "Do you really think you can exclude me from this?" She looked away. "The truth? I don't know. I didn't know how to deal with it. I didn't know how to move forward without feeling the weight of the past pressing down on her shoulders. I need time." It was the first truly sincere thing she had said since the impact of that news hit her. He remained silent for a moment, watching her as if trying to decipher every thought she couldn't yet organize. "I'm not going anywhere, Isabel." She closed her eyes. That was what she feared, because no matter how much she tried to deny it, a part of her wanted to believe that he was telling the truth. And that part was too dangerous to be heard. Interactive question. What do you think led to Isabel and Marcus's divorce? Do you believe Marcus truly wants to be a part of their child's life? Or is this just a temporary reaction to the news? Isabel looked away, feeling the suffocating weight of Marcus's presence in the room. He was still there, watching her with that intensity that always left her vulnerable. But now, there was no room for vulnerability, not after everything they had been through. She closed her eyes for a moment, trying to find a trace of calm within the whirlwind forming in her mind. But all she found was the echo of a past that had never completely left her. Their story was never ordinary. At first, it seemed invincible. The first encounter was by chance, one of those moments that destiny orchestrates with surgical precision. Isabel was in Paris for a conference. Marcus was there for a business meeting. Two strangers in a bustling city, united by chance and by the undeniable spark that arose as soon as their eyes met. He was confident, charming in a way that wasn't limited to words. There was something in the way he looked at her, as if he saw something in her that no one else did. Isabel was never one to act on impulse, but that night, when Marcus invited her to dinner, she accepted without hesitation. Paris was the beginning. There were nights in dimly lit restaurants, whispered conversations about dreams and ambitions, promises murmured between hotel sheets. Isabel had never felt anything like it before. The world seemed more vibrant when she was with him, more intense. And Marcus made her feel alive in a way no one else had. When they returned home, it wasn't long before everything became even more serious. The courtship quickly evolved into an engagement, and, in a short time, into a marriage that, at first glance, seemed perfect. But perfection was an illusion. The first signs of wear and tear came silently, like small cracks in a wall that from a distance still seemed intact. Marcus had always been a man of insatiable ambition. He didn't just want the best, he demanded the best. He was meticulous, strategic, determined to build an empire that would be unbreakable. And at first, Isabel admired that about him. But she soon realized that his ambition consumed everything around him, including her. Nights, once filled with long dinners and laughter, became solitary. Marcus spent more time in meetings than at home. When he returned, it was too late for any meaningful conversation. Silence began to grow between them, occupying the space that was once filled with desire, laughter, and love. Isabel tried to convince herself that it was just a phase, that everything would go back to normal. But then came the demands. Marcus was never the type to raise his voice. He never explicitly forbade anything. But there was always a comment, a suggestion, a look that said more than words. You no longer need to work. I can give you everything. This dress is a bit daring, don't you think? I don't think it's a good idea for you to travel alone. What will people think? At first, there were small concessions, nothing that seemed significant enough to be a problem. But little by little, she realized that she was disappearing within the marriage. Invitations to events became rarer. Outings with friends became a source of veiled arguments. Isabel no longer recognized the woman she saw in the mirror, and when she tried to talk about it, when she gathered the courage to tell Marcus that she felt suffocated, that she needed space for herself, he simply didn't listen. This is just in your head, Isabel. I just want what's best for you. The best. What Marcus never understood was that the best for her was not what he believed was right. The first time she asked for time, Marcus laughed. In fact, he laughed, as if the idea was absurd. You're being dramatic. The second time, he remained silent for a few seconds before simply changing the subject. And the third time, when Isabel could no longer breathe within the marriage, he looked at her with disbelief. I don't know what else you need. I've given you everything. Everything. Except freedom. Except choice. except the feeling that she still owned her own life. That's how their love was lost. Not in a big scandal, not in a devastating betrayal, but in the slow and irreversible erosion of a marriage that ceased to be a home. And now, there, in the hospital, forced to confront the man she once loved more than anything, Isabel felt as if she had returned to that moment. The past infiltrated the present like a ghost that refused to disappear. Marcus was no longer her husband. He no longer had control over her. But somehow, he still had power over her feelings, and that terrified her. She breathed slowly, trying to keep her voice firm. "You can want to be a part of this, Marcus, but I don't know if I want you near me." He didn't blink. "Do you still hate me that much?" Isabel clenched her lips. "Hate you? I don't hate you, Marcus. That's precisely the problem." For a moment, he seemed confused, but then something gleamed in his eyes. Understanding, and a glimmer of something more. Hope. "This isn't over, Isabel." She felt her heart constrict. "Yes, it is over, Marcus. We signed those papers. But a paper doesn't erase what we were." Isabel looked away. "But it can prevent us from doing anything again." The answer hung in the air. The past haunted them, and whether they wanted to or not, they would have to face it. Interactive question. Do you think Marcus has truly changed, or is this just a temporary reaction to the news? Share your thoughts in the comments. Marcus was never a man who accepted defeat. For him, everything was a matter of strategy, planning, control. He always knew exactly what he wanted and how to get it. He had built his career that way. He kept his life organized that way. The world was a chessboard, and he was always the most skilled player. But Isabel was never a pawn in that game. And now, for the first time in his life, Marcus didn't know what to do. He watched her from the other side of the room, his arms crossed over his chest, as if trying to protect himself from her proximity. Since they received the news of the pregnancy, Isabel had become more distant each day, rejecting any attempt at closeness. But there were moments when he saw her resistance falter, when their gazes met for too long, when their fingers accidentally touched, when the silence between them became denser than the words they tried to say. She still felt something for him. He knew it. But would it be enough? Marcus clenched his jaw and looked away towards the window. Outside, the day stretched out, indifferent to the chaos within him. He hated that feeling of helplessness, that uncertainty slipping under his skin like a poison. He needed to show that he had changed. But how? Because, if he was honest with himself, he didn't know exactly how to change. Isabel had always been his exception, his ruin, and his salvation. And now everything depended on his ability to convince her that he would never leave her alone again. He turned to look at her again, observing the way she kept her gaze fixed on the floor, her arms still crossed like an invisible barrier. "You can't push me away from this, Isabel." She slowly raised her eyes, and he saw the internal battle reflected there. "I'm not trying to push you away, but that doesn't mean I trust you." Marcus took a deep breath, holding back the instinctive response he wanted to give her. The old version of himself would have argued, tried to reason with logic, demonstrating with well-structured words that he was right. But that had never worked with Isabel, and if he wanted her to believe him, he would have to act differently. He took a step forward. Isabel didn't back away, but her body tensed. "I know words aren't enough, but if you give me a chance, I'll show you I'm different." She laughed, but there was no humor in her laugh. "Do you think this is a contract, Marcus? Something that can be resolved with promises and guarantees?" He studied her for a moment before replying. "No, I think it's much more than that." The answer took her by surprise. Isabel blinked, her lips parted as if she were going to argue, but nothing came out. He moved a little closer, just enough to feel her accelerated breathing. "Let me be here." She held his gaze. "And when things get difficult, will you still be here?" He didn't hesitate. "Yes, and when work demands everything from you, I'll choose you." Isabel closed her eyes for a moment, as if absorbing those words. When she opened them again, Marcus realized she wasn't ready to yield. Not yet, but something in her had changed. He saw it in the way she didn't back away this time, and how her eyes lingered on his for a little longer before looking away. It still wasn't enough, but it was a beginning. The months passed in the blink of an eye. Time, which once seemed an implacable enemy, now became a silent ally, allowing Isabel and Marcus to navigate this new reality at a pace they could both handle. He was still there, present at every appointment, attentive to every detail, always making sure she didn't have to carry that burden alone. And Isabel, little by little, began to allow herself to trust him. Not completely, not without reservations, but enough to accept the hot coffee he handed her without her having to ask, to let him drive her home when she was too tired to drive, enough to allow him to be close. And then, in an instant, everything fell apart. It was an ordinary day, or at least it should have been. Isabel left the doctor's office with a discreet smile. The pregnancy was going well, the baby was healthy, and for the first time in a long time, she felt light, until she saw Marcus across the street. She knew he would come pick her up. Lately, he always did, but there was something different about him that day. Something tense, rigid. Isabel frowned and crossed the street, feeling a growing unease in her chest. "Is everything all right?" Marcus didn't answer immediately. His jaw was clenched, his dark eyes loaded with something she couldn't decipher. And then, "Were you with him?" Isabel blinked. Confused. With whom? With David. The name came out laden with venom, and only then did Isabel understand. David was her former colleague, a friend, someone who had been close when her marriage began to crumble, offering support without ever crossing boundaries. But Marcus had always hated David. He always saw him as a threat. Although Isabel had assured him countless times that there was nothing between them beyond friendship, she felt a tightness in her chest. "Marcus, I just ran into him by chance. We talked for a few minutes, that's all." But he was no longer listening to her. "Of course, it was just a coincidence, wasn't it? The same guy who spent years waiting for me to make a mistake so he could get close to you." Marcus's tone grew harsher, colder, and in that instant, Isabel felt transported back to the past, to a time when her every word was analyzed with suspicion, when her every move was a possible threat to the control Marcus insisted on having over her. And the worst part? She saw in his eyes that he also perceived it, that he saw the exact moment she closed off again. But instead of backing away, he moved forward. "Are you still talking to him?" His voice was low, but laden with something dark. Isabel crossed her arms. "I'm not going to answer that kind of question." Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in his laugh. "Of course not, because you're never wrong, are you, Isabel?" She felt a knot in her throat. He didn't realize what he was doing. "Marcus, stop!" But he didn't stop. "I should have known. You've always had a great ability to trust the wrong people." The words were spoken without thinking, but the impact was immediate. Isabel stood still, her eyes wide, breath held in her chest. And then something inside her broke. The silence that followed was worse than any scream. "I'm not doing this again!" Her voice came out low, but firm. Marcus realized too late. "Isabel!" But she was already walking away. "You promised you had changed." He ran a hand over his face, as if trying to contain something within himself. "I did change." "Then why are you still trying to control me?" He had no answer. Isabel exhaled slowly, feeling her chest tremble. "I need space." "No!" Marcus's response was immediate. But this time it wasn't an order. It was a plea. "Don't push me away, Isabel." She closed her eyes. "Then give me a reason not to." The silence that followed was devastating, and when Marcus finally tried to speak, it was too late. She was already gone. Interactive question. How will Marcus cope with Isabel's departure and his inability to control the situation? What do you think will happen to Isabel and the baby as she tries to navigate this alone again? In the following days, Marcus tried to call, tried to stop by her apartment, tried to find any way to undo that mistake. But Isabel didn't answer. And then, when he finally decided to back off and wait for her to come to him, fate showed him it wouldn't grant him that luxury. The call came in the middle of the night, the hospital's number flashed on his phone screen, and everything inside him froze. "Mr. Thorne." The sound of his own name made his heart ache against his ribs. "Yes, you need to come to the hospital now. It's about Isabel." He didn't remember the way there, only the metallic taste of panic in his mouth, his trembling hands on the steering wheel, the suffocating feeling that if something happened to her or the baby, he would never forgive himself. When he arrived, the hospital was bathed in that cold, indifferent light, and the antiseptic smell seemed stronger than usual. He strode through the hallways until he found a nurse who recognized him immediately. "Where is she?" The woman hesitated for a second. "Mrs. Miller was admitted with complications. They had to take her to surgery." The word hit Marcus like a punch. Surgery? She had a premature placental abruption. The situation is delicate, but the doctors are doing everything possible. Delicate. The word resonated in his mind as the world around him lost its shape. He sat on the nearest chair, but he couldn't feel anything beneath him. It was as if he were floating, as if his own existence had been reduced to that moment. And then, for the first time in his life, Marcus understood what it meant to be completely helpless. There was nothing he could do, no strategy he could devise, no money he could pay to fix this. He could only wait and pray. Time distorted. Every minute seemed like an eternity. And then, finally, a doctor appeared. Marcus jumped from his seat, his heart pounding. "How is she?" The doctor sighed, and Marcus felt the weight of that sound even before the words were spoken. "The baby is in fetal distress. We need to act fast." It was then that Marcus understood what that meant. They had to choose. Save Isabel, or save the baby. The ground seemed to disappear beneath his feet. "We'll do everything possible for both," the doctor said, trying to stay calm. "But Mr. Thorne, if we have to prioritize one of them, we need your decision now. The decision. The moment that would define everything." He looked towards the closed door of the room where Isabel was. Would he lose her? After everything. After finally understanding that he loved her in a way he had never understood before. After realizing that she was the center of everything. Would he have to let her go? And then, for a second, a memory came to his mind. Isabel, the first time she felt the baby move, bringing her hands to her belly with a smile of pure adoration. Isabel, caressing the ultrasound as if she had known that little life inside her for years. Isabel, saying softly, one night, without knowing he was listening, "I would do anything for my child." That was it. That was what truly mattered. He closed his eyes for an instant and took a deep breath, and then he looked at the doctor. "Save the baby." The doctor nodded and disappeared down the hallways. And Marcus remained there, alone, feeling the weight of the most difficult decision he had ever made. Time passed slowly, and when the operating room door finally opened, everything inside him stopped. Because there, surrounded by nurses, with a tired but alive look, was Isabel. She survived, and the baby too. But something was different. Isabel was weak, pale, her eyes heavy with exhaustion and pain. When their gazes finally met, something shone there. Not anger, not total relief, but something deep, something between gratitude and incomprehension. She moved her lips, her voice almost a whisper. "You chose the baby?" Marcus's chest tightened. "I chose what you would have chosen." The silence between them was thick, and then the tears came. Not from him, but from her. Isabel didn't cry from weakness, nor from pain. She cried because for the first time she saw Marcus understand what it meant to love someone without trying to possess them, without trying to mold them. He understood. And in that instant, Marcus knew his life would never be the same. This time, he hadn't fought to win Isabel. He had fought to be the man she deserved. And perhaps, for the first time, he was close to achieving it. What it meant to love someone more than himself. And now, there, standing in front of the room where Isabel held the small, fragile body of the baby against her chest, Marcus felt something he had never experienced before, the fullness of having done the right thing. The following months were a blur of changes. Isabel needed time to recover from the surgery. The baby was under observation for a few weeks, but soon the doctors assured them he was healthy. A boy, small, but strong. They named him Leo. It was Isabel who chose the name, and Marcus didn't argue. For the first time, he accepted something without objection. He had already made all the wrong decisions in the past. This one, he wanted it to be hers. But accepting didn't mean everything was easy. Because if there was one thing Marcus had learned, it was that love cannot be forced. Love is won, day after day, and that's exactly what he did. Isabel's house became a silent refuge, where time seemed to slow down. Marcus came almost every day, but he didn't intrude. He never crossed the boundaries she imposed on him. When Isabel needed to rest, he stayed with Leo. When Leo cried in the middle of the night, he arrived before Isabel could get up. And when she felt lost, exhausted, overwhelmed with everything, Marcus was simply there, not demanding, not pressuring, waiting. Isabel realized. She realized that for the first time, Marcus wasn't trying to control her. He wasn't trying to define what they would be. He simply remained present, like a silent certainty, like a firm foundation she could choose to use, or not. He changed, and so did she, because at some point, Isabel found herself watching him with different eyes. Not the Marcus she had left, not the Marcus she feared, but the Marcus who held Leo in his arms, with a tenderness she never imagined he possessed. The Marcus who didn't get impatient when the baby cried. The Marcus who made her coffee every morning without saying anything, simply leaving the cup on the counter before leaving. The Marcus who understood when she needed silence. And little by little, Isabel felt the armor she had built begin to crack. Time passed, and then something happened. The first time he touched her again was unintentional. Isabel was on the sofa, holding Leo. When Marcus sat beside her, he gently ran his hand through the baby's hair, and his arm brushed hers. An insignificant touch, but Isabel felt it. She felt the warmth of his skin, the familiarity of that gesture. She felt the years return in a second, felt her heart race, and when she looked up, Marcus was already looking at her. They stayed like that for a moment. Silence, a mutual understanding. And then Isabel looked away, because she wasn't ready yet. But she knew in that instant that it was only a matter of time. The problem was that time didn't wait for them. That night it was pouring rain. Marcus was about to leave when Isabel, who was watching the storm from the window, finally made a decision. Stay. The word was spoken so softly that, for a second, Marcus thought he had imagined it. But then she turned to look at him, and in her eyes, there was something new, something definitive. He didn't ask if he could, and she didn't need to answer, because when he approached, Isabel lifted her face to receive him. The kiss was slow, different from all the others they had shared before. There was no rush, no need. It was a choice. And when he separated his lips from hers, Isabel finally realized. They weren't getting back together because they needed each other. They were getting back together because they loved each other. This time, their love wasn't a power game. It was a partnership. And finally, it was enough. We hope this story moved you. Don't forget to like it, subscribe, and share it with your loved ones. Your support means the world to us. Thank you for joining us on this journey.